What's up, everybody? I'm Jesse, or Game Over Jesse as you all may know me, and today I have a very awesome guest with me, Nathaniel. You know him from Zelda Informer, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for those that may not know who you are?
Yes, I am Nathaniel Rumpel-Jantz, the editor-in-chief at Zelda Informer. I've been doing that for 7 years, and I've been running Zelda sites for 18 years, so most of my life.
Yeah. And today we're here to talk to you all about the recent Zelda Wii U rumors that we've gotten leaked and sort of Nintendo's plans for E3 with the reveal of the NX and their mobile games and everything. So let's start off with the 3 rumors that got revealed or leaked yesterday. What are your thoughts on them? Because some of them are heavily debated topics in the Zelda community. There are some people that say if Zelda gets voice acting, then it'll ruin the entire franchise for them, but then there's people that support the idea. So where do you kind of fall on this, and what are your thoughts with Nintendo evolving the series this way?
It's been a long time coming. I think when it comes to video games, there are some games that almost cling to tradition as a fault. A lack of voice acting in 2016 in a major AAA game is baffling. And we're not just talking about like a racing game or something where voice acting really doesn't needed. This doesn't matter. We're talking about an action adventure game with tons and tons of dialogue, with cutscenes that could have paragraphs upon paragraphs of dialogue. And my issue with, especially the 3D Zelda games, is every time there was a major impactful cutscene, some of that impact was lost because the whole scene would pause for you to read text.
Right.
And that really took me out of the moment. And I didn't like that. Now, I understand some of the counter arguments like Princess Zelda, Ganondorf. Some of these characters have been around a long time, and a lot of people have their own imaginations for what their voices are in their heads. That's great. But there's a lot of different Zeldas, a lot of different Links. I know there's so far only really been one Ganondorf, but it's one of those things that I think voice acting shouldn't be viewed as necessarily a negative. Now I know Nintendo themselves does not have a good reputation when it comes to voice acting, because I think the only one of their first voice acting games ever was Metroid Other M, and I know people hated the voice acting in that, especially for Samus. And I didn't hate the voice acting as much as a lot of those people did, but it seemed their voice actor for Samus kind of made her seem emotionless, and that might have been what they were going for, so it actually might have totally fit the character that they designed, and you just didn't like that character design for the personality. But the rumor itself states specifically that Link would not be voice acted. So the biggest worry that anyone would have is that the silent protagonist idea would be gone. So if you're someone who likes to project yourself onto Link, if you view Link as an avatar, that's still going to be there. They're not giving him a voice. You are still in your head, or whatever's going on, you are the voice of Link still. Right. So if they're doing voice acting, they're doing it right. Now there's 2 different ways they can approach voice acting, and I actually saw HMK bring this up when he posted about the news himself. And it was that they could have a spoken Hylian language that you could translate, to understand yourself, but in the game, that's what it is, and it still ends up having the text boxes. Right,
and we've seen, sorry to interrupt you, but we've seen Nintendo sort of experiment with that before. I believe Midna and Fi, or Fi, however you want to pronounce her name, spoke in their own garbled language.
Yep. So it's entirely possible that that's just what they mean. That now all the characters will have their own unique voice in that way, but it's still going to sound like gibberish to us. But it might not actually be gibberish. It could be its own made-up language. That's not what I want to see, though. I want the full, impactful, actual voice acting. And I want them, if they're going to do it, they need to do it right. And to me, I know in Nintendo of America, they tend to, like for Star Fox, they tend to use their localization team at Nintendo Treehouse as also the voice actors. Yeah. Most of them are not professional voice actors. They didn't join the Treehouse to do that. They joined to translate. So it would be nice if they decided, Zelda's a huge franchise. We can't just can't just grab in-house people for this. Let's go out and let's grab real voice actors that can actually bring some character to it, and that's what makes this rumor almost slightly unbelievable, because they'd have to do that for every language they want to translate it into.
Right.
But that's what I want to see. There are so many games that have done it right. I hate bringing it up because I don't think it's a fair comparison to Zelda, but the voice acting in The Witcher 3 was like perfect.
Yeah.
And there's as many examples as there are of bad voice acting. There are very good voice acting in games, and if they can figure it out, and they're a much smaller company than Nintendo, CD Projekt Red, I don't see how Nintendo can't be given a benefit of the doubt to get it right with Zelda. Now, there's always going to be the case that you might not like the accent used or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean the quality of the voice acting is bad. You just have a personal preference.
Right, and it was an interview or a statement released by Aonuba, I believe, after Hyrule Warriors came out, where he mentioned that he was kind of surprised. I'm not quoting this exactly, but he was surprised by the fan reactions and how positively the cutscenes from Hyrule Warriors were taken, and he was going to implement something like the Hyrule Warriors cutscenes for Zelda Wii U. Do you think this in any way influenced how voice acting came to it, since with larger cutscenes and stuff, you would expect it to have voice acting?
Obviously, I think cutscenes are when we think about voice acting, we have to consider, why does voice acting matter? It's not just about taking the text off the screen. It's about making you as a person, when you're playing the game, feel like you're in this living, breathing world. And every time you read text, you're kind of taken out of that world to read what someone inside that world is thinking or saying.
Right.
And cutscenes are obviously the biggest downfall of that, because a cutscene is literally like a little movie you're watching that is being paused. And in Hyrule Warriors, they didn't really have voice acting in Hyrule Warriors. They had a narrator, and that's a purposeful choice, just based on the Warrior series, that they like having their narrators. So, I don't know that it really had much of an influence. I think the high quality CGI that they used, especially in the Wii U version, that's, I think, more so what he's referring to, is that they've always, if you look back on previous Zelda games, they've kind of always used the in-game graphics and the models, and kind of just made their cutscenes around that, so it seemed really seamless. But in Hyrule Warriors, there was a big difference between the gameplay and the cutscenes. The cutscenes were like, you're watching professional CGI level there. And I think he was talking more about the quality of the presentation of those cutscenes, and it's almost kind of like, fans are loving these high quality CGI cutscenes. We can't let a side game outdo our own Zelda series. We need to step our game up.
Right.
So I think that's what he's more talking. The narrator's interesting. I don't really want to see a narrator in Zelda U at all, unless the only part of the game that makes sense to maybe narrate, if they're going to have voice acting in the whole game anyways, would be, say, the pre-story, the preamble, when you boot up the game and it's telling you the legend, kind of like, when it's going through the storyboard, like in the Wind Waker, and they could narrate that and have a narrator for it. But I don't really think the voice acting aspect had anything to do with Hyrule Warriors, just because there really wasn't voice acting.
Right.
Again, it was a lot of text, and I think that actually worked against Hyrule Warriors, because you're in the midst of this frantic battle, and you have all these little text pop-ups from these characters trying to give you information, and are you really taking the time to read that as you're getting your butt whooped by whatever you're fighting? So I think just a lot gets lost. A lot of the impact of what's happening can get lost when you're just reading text.
Right. Especially with text, there's a lot of people that just mash through it because they don't want to spend the time reading, when they could just have it spoken to them by the characters.
Well, and plus there's always intent. One thing that text, and this is a common problem on the internet, when people are writing comments, is they can't always tell if you're being sarcastic. They can't always tell what the tone is of what you're saying. There's all these hidden meanings people read into the text that are in the game, or what characters have said, which is really interesting and really intriguing, but that might not have anything to do with what the developers intended. And we don't know that because they can't put intonation into a text.
Right.
So it's a lot harder to convey. And it's really interesting how, novelists and actual authors and writers are able to do that through text in their own books. But again, Nintendo, they're not hiring professional novelists. I mean, AJ Gnomo himself just admitted he wrote a lot of the lines of text in Skyward Sword. He admitted this a couple months ago.
Yeah,
that he wrote a lot of the dialogue, and he doesn't have a journalism degree. He doesn't have a writing degree. He's a programmer. So
even in the Wind Waker, he mentioned whenever he was being interviewed that he wrote a lot of the lines from the King of Red Lions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's one of those that they're not hiring like a professional author to do it, to maybe convey that a bit better. And that's fine. I don't know that video games necessarily need that if it's a heavily gameplay focused game like Zelda usually is. But that also means that if you're including lines of text that you want to be impactful in a certain way, you might only get that impact if you can include intonation, which would mean which would mean voice acting. So I've always wanted voice acting. I've been arguing for it for the last 15 years. I didn't think they were ever going to do it. I hope that these rumors are true and that it is happening. And I hope that Zelda fans, even if you don't like it, you are really traditionalist, as I've seen a lot of fans of Zelda Informer are very traditionalist. I just hope you're willing to give it a chance before you just write it off as this terrible thing. If the voice acting ends up being really, really bad, and it's just people at the treehouse who did it, and their voices don't match the characters or the personalities of the characters at all, I get it. It's cool. Yeah. Whatever. Nintendo, don't do it again unless you can do it right. But
I think since this is such a controversial thing, and Nintendo should know that by now, they should include the option to just mute it for those people that don't want it. That way, if you don't want it, you don't have to listen to it. If you do, then
there's some games even that have voice acting in it do include the ability to turn on the text. So you could turn on text boxes if you want, or just like when you watch certain movies, you can turn on closed captioning and all that stuff. So I think if they do it, there's going to be an option to turn on text so you can read it. Whether or not they're going to have the ability to in turn turn off the voices, I don't know. That's not common with a lot of games of voice acting to do that. Probably because they spent so much money on voice acting, they don't want you turning that off. But I don't know. I'm really excited by it. The fact that this rumor comes from a fairly credible person. This is the first time that I actually have a small belief in me that voice acting is going to be a thing in Zelda. Like E3 could not come sooner, man.
Right.